Thanks for tuning into another Dolphins podcast. I'm Jake, and I have Kat and Houtz joining me to preview Week 4 of the NFL season as the Dolphins will host the Tennessee Titans on Monday Night Football. Happy Friday, boys. Let me start this off with a quick question. Kat, we're 3 weeks into the NFL season. Would you say that's long enough for us to kind of start believing some of the emerging trends and stats we're seeing from these NFL teams?
Yeah, I think three or 4 weeks is about the time where you start to see those things. And the trends, obviously, with the Dolphins right now are certainly not good. And this upcoming weekend reminds me of almost 3 years ago to the date, the 2021 season. If you remember, Week 4 they played the Colts. They were 1-2. They had they played the Bills in Week 2 and got blown out. Tua got hurt. And there we were in Week 4, and the Colts were coming to town with Carson Wentz, and they were not a good team at the time. And I looked at that game and I said, okay, if you can't win that game, then there's not a lot of hope for the rest of the year. That's when the wheels really start falling off, if they haven't already. I look at this game here, Week 4 at home against the Titans on prime time, as kind of that same way.
Yeah, and I think we're long enough now where you can start to, believe some of these trends we're seeing. But like Kat mentioned with the Dolphins, it's an absolute anomaly. But before the year, this was that one game that really stuck out, right? Because we all had that lingering taste from that 28-27 loss last season where the Dolphins pretty much imploded late in the year. So I do think this is that breaking point. We are ready now to see what hopefully this offense looks like with Snoop Huntley. And I keep thinking in the back of my head, I'm pretty stoked for that. But what if he fails? And then what do we have? Because then it's just a long, long season of disarray.
Kat, I brought up that season you were looking at there where I kind of blacked out for a lot of these games. I just am so stuck on that loss to Jacksonville. In that Colts game, the 27-17 loss, Miami's leading rusher, Malcolm Brown. I think his first name was Malcolm.
Yep, Malcolm Brown. Yeah, he picked him up from the Rams. That was another beauty running back from the Brian Flores era, along with Jordan Howard and a handful of other guys.
Howard tarnished that Ricky Williams jersey. He tarnished that Ricky Williams jersey.
Sure did.
Kat, before we start climbing into this game, I wanted to get your thoughts about Week 3. It was a pretty disappointing effort from the Dolphins. Well-rounded, I think we can all say that. But was there anything that truly stuck out to you or really disappointed you about that performance? Because I kind of just look at Malcolm Brown, running the ball for 25 yards. I was a little disappointed with how Miami's approach from running the football, whether it's not using Jalen Wright, maybe a little too much Devon Achane up the middle. That seemed like a big issue for me now that I've had a few days to settle.
I mean, really, my issue with the offense in general is this is the third year of Mike McDaniel, the third year of Frank Smith, and Skylar Thompson's been on the team for 3 years, and the Dolphins can't get it. They're completely unprepared to run an offensive play. Like this year, guys, in 3 games of football, the Dolphins are averaging a pre-snap penalty once every 12 minutes. Like it's pathetic. And no wonder why you can't get things right. You can't even get plays in properly. I mean, you're telling me that you saw the epic rant from whoever that one guy was, but about how you have the same exact game plan that you would have had for Tua, and you have it for Skylar Thompson. I mean, to me in this offense, there's just so much going on that if you take Tua out of it, it becomes borderline impossible for any quarterback to win unless you severely dumb things down.
It's just kind of like an opening, right? Like it's just a wide eye opening that we're sitting here seeing Mike McDaniel's offense is. It literally turns into a pumpkin without Tua. They have 11 points this season, 32nd in the NFL per game. I mean, it does look like it's just absolute disarray. And you mentioned Skylar Thompson. I mean, I think I kind of sat here and thought, okay, it makes sense that he's going to get that start, and we thought he might look better, and it just was not the case at all. So I'm just praying that it's just a decoy that they have him out there putting his jersey on. But if we got to sit through Skylar Thompson again, please God.
Houtz, you mentioned it a little bit at the top. We don't have to talk long about this, but Kat, is it Tyler Huntley's job? Is this even worth talking about? Tim Boyle, maybe Skylar Thompson with the rib injury. Is there any doubt that Tyler Huntley's the starting quarterback on Monday?
Gosh, Tim Boyle. I mean, did you think watching that Amazon Prime game, like 10 months ago that we'd be sitting here in 10 months talking about how Tim Boyle might be the quarterback of this football team. Like, yeah, I'm done with Skylar Thompson. I've been done with Skylar Thompson for 2.5 years. So this is just par for the course for me. He doesn't have an NFL arm. I mean, I'm done with him. Snoop Huntley, look, I understand that he just got here, but I take a look over at, for example, the Green Bay Packers.
Exactly.
Traded for Malik Willis, the first couple of days of September. Now, it's not like the guy's ripping off like 400-yard games here, but they develop game plans where he goes 12 for 14 and they run the ball 40 times. Do the Dolphins have that within themselves to do that? If they do and they run the ball successfully, I think they can beat the Titans here. But are they going to have the discipline to be able to do that is my question.
But that's what we want to see, right? We want to see Mike McDaniel. Again, I had that header, this offensive outside the box mastermind, this offensive guru. You know, it looks like we mentioned without Tua out there that it is just absolutely, he has no idea what to do. So I hope we come out and see more of a run first style offense, like you mentioned with Malik Willis. But it just, every quarterback that we're sitting here talking about this year just makes you wish you had the DeLorean to hop in and go back and get a Sam Darnold, make a trade for a Justin Fields or whatever it might be, because we should have saw this coming.
It's funny that you guys bring up the Packers game because that's who the Titans played last week. The Packers ran away with a 30-14 win over the Titans. And Malik Willis, basically what you're saying, he was 13 of 19 for 202 yards and a touchdown, ran the ball 6 times for 73 yards and also a rushing touchdown. A lot of Malik Willis there, but let me tell you, that was a well-rounded team win. I think Willis only threw the ball farther than 10 yards down the field 4 times. He completed 3 of those. They just really kept the game clean. They stayed one step ahead of the Titans. And Kat, is it crazy that this is a big ask for the Dolphins to really lean into what one of their biggest strengths should be when you consider 5.1 yards per carry last year, when you consider Mike McDaniel, his ability to run the football, and just the depth of different skill sets at running back the Dolphins have? This should be like a great blueprint that the Miami Dolphins could lean on, but all of a sudden I'm queasy.
Well, part of it too, yeah, I agree with you. Part of it too, though, is when it comes to running the ball, the Dolphins get themselves in so many situations where it's 2nd 11, 2nd and 16, where if you take it down by down, it's like, okay, well, there weren't as many opportunities to run as people think that there were. Agreed. Now, granted, I think, yes, should they have run a little bit more in the Seahawks game? Absolutely, they should have. And partially what factors in too is that they were down the entire time. They haven't led for a minute this year, and that's certainly got to change. But yeah, I don't know where that factors in, but it's they need to be more. They need to get some 2nd and 6s, some 3rd and 2s, and then be able to convert them. I mean, it's simple as that.
Skylar Thompson was sacked 5 times by the Seattle Seahawks. Kat, I was so ready to just MF everyone on the offensive line after that game. It felt like they had such a poor performance. But that was another scenario where I felt, all right, it wasn't really as bad as we thought. But Jeffrey Simmons, an absolute monster in the middle of the defense. How is Miami really going to be able to handle this Tennessee Titans front and hopefully, as a result, open up some 2nd and 6s like you were saying?
Yeah, I mean, probably a lot of runs to the outside here because T'Vondre Sweat and Jeffrey Simmons. Simmons missed practice with an elbow injury here, but should play in this game. That's a lot of beef to handle in the middle. And the unfortunate thing with the Dolphins here in terms of just week-by-week matchups is everybody that they face along any defensive line that they face is probably going to be better than them. That's just the reality because – especially with Armstead, what he deals with every week. I mean, it's tough with this offensive line. So, yeah, it's going to be a big challenge inside with Liam Eichenberg, Aaron Brewer, who faces his former team, and Robert Jones. So hopefully they can get the ball out of their hands quickly and try to run downhill a little bit to see if you can get something going.
Yeah, last name is the one that really scares me. Robert Jones looked outmatched, and we sit here and talk about, we all really thought the world of Christian Wilkins, but Jeffrey Simmons is almost, an entirely different monster. So I agree with you, Kat. You got to attack those edges, but I'm looking at their roster, and they got some good edges on the outside too. I think Harold Landry's leading the team in sacks. So there's definitely some playmakers on this Titans defense. And as we saw before, they've given us fits, even if it isn't, Vrabel in that defense. The Dolphins have had fits in the past against this front.
Kat, you mentioned the penalties a little while ago. I mean, 7 false starts, 6 offensive holdings, 6 illegal formations. Part of that's the offensive line, and part of that's the tight ends. But I wanted to ask you, do you see a point where these Miami Dolphins coaches can finally put their foot down? Because, I mean, these issues are just hamstringing the team so much.
Unfortunately, how often, just take the Dolphins out of the equation, how often do you see a team after 3 years suddenly go from undisciplined to disciplined, and from I hate to say it, but I mean, weak to strong? I mean, I think we've earned the right to say that here after 3 years. I mean, I'm not saying there haven't been great big plays and great moments here. Heck, the Dolphins led the league in offensive categories last year. I mean, but they have to be more disciplined from week to week. And after saying that now for here 3 years, why do I think anything here is going to change?
And it goes back to just wondering if Mike McDaniel can, get that edge and get that, out of their players. 27th in the league in total penalties, going against the Titans, who are 5th in the league. So, the huge disparity there. And again, when you have a young quarterback, or I guess he's not young, but an unfamiliar quarterback, he's going to be out there. Snoop Huntley, most likely the offense is going to be dumbed down, and you can't be making mistakes like that, because those things are drive killers in games where at this point, every Sunday you got to win these games at 1-2, staring 1-3 in the down the scope. That's not good.
Teron Armstead is in concussion protocol. His availability for this game is up in the air. Kendall Lamb had a solid performance. Would you stick with him for the time being, or are you itching to see someone like Patrick Paul hit the field?
I think Kendall Lamb has earned the right to have another start here and go slowly with Patrick Paul. Otherwise, why'd you even bring back Kendall Lamb? I mean, if he gets in there accidentally because of an injury and then has a good game against the Seahawks, one of the few people that have a good game, I say give him another one.
Yeah, for as much as I want to see that face mask out there, I'm fine just keeping him on the back burner and letting Kendall Lamb go out there, because I think, what was it, Jake? You said 41 snaps, I think 0 pressures or something on the previous pod. I mean, dude played very, very well last week.
Austin Jackson's been solid, and man, hearing Jeffrey Simmons talk about Aaron Brewer just scares the crap out of me. Simmons was talking with ESPN and a couple of other reporters. He said that Aaron Brewer is still the same player. I practiced against Brewer. I know him. He's quick, going lateral. He's a guy I feel good about. Our nose tackle lined up over him, especially with his strengths. Kat, do you see Miami finding a way to run the football? And with that, how do you think they can kind of avoid those monsters in the middle?
I think you've got to mix in some sweeps to the outside for Devon Achane. And but the problem is, and this is just a matchup problem in general, you start to do that a few times and that becomes very predictable. And that's when you get those 4-yard losses where it's 2nd and 14 now. And now you're having to throw the ball with your third string quarterback. So yeah, they've got to find a running game in here somewhere, but how are you moving those two big guys out of the middle is my question.
Yeah, and the best way to do it is to use some of that misdirection, right? Maybe even, we talked about the zone read with Snoop Huntley. That's definitely a come into play here. And I think Raheem Mostert might finally be back. So they got to get that run game established if they want to, have any chance in this one, to be honest.
32 pass attempts to just 18 carries last week, 28 plays in the first half against the Seahawks, 20 were designed pass plays. Kat, do you think either the last 2 games would have looked a little different with someone like Raheem Mostert on the field? Mike McDaniel, he has those players he just loves and he trusts so much. I feel like Mostert is one of those guys, and I think about that Kansas City Chiefs game last year in Germany where, for lack of better words, I feel like Mostert was in there at halftime just screaming, "Let us run the MFN football." And I feel like that's something Miami could have kind of leaned on, just having that trusty, reliable tailback over the last 2 games.
No, I don't think Mostert really would have made a difference. I mean, I think Mostert's a good player, but it seems to me that when the Dolphins as a team are either running really well or they're not, or they're choosing to run the ball or they're not. And Mostert's either part of that or isn't quite fixing the problem. So I think he's a solid player, and the Dolphins are a better team with him. But yeah, they've got a lot of talented backs. It's a matter of sticking to the run and having it be effective.
And we got to talk about Miami's receivers. When you have guys getting paid as much as Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle, Kat, what are you expecting from this unit against the Tennessee Titans team that, generally speaking, I have to only describe them as very, very volatile? They're either going to be doing something really strong or really poor. Through 3 games, they've been doing a lot more of the poor, but there are some weapons over there.
Well, last week when we talked about Tyreek Hill and Waddle, and we talked about him going up against Devon Witherspoon and Reek Woolen here, and I made the comment of this is probably the best young cornerback tandem you're going to face all year. And they played like it. I mean, Dolphins scored 3 points. So this week you've got Roger McCreary, you've got L'Jarius Sneed. That's a pretty solid tandem. Sneed is certainly Tyreek Hill's former teammate, so that'll be an interesting matchup if that happens. They don't quite pack the size and speed, however, of Reek Woolen and Devon Witherspoon, but it's still a solid tandem with Sneed being better than McCreary.
Yeah, and for me, when you have Tyreek Hill, when you have Jalen Waddle, I mean, whoever they match up against, you're hoping that they can, get the best of them. You mentioned L'Jarius Sneed being his former player. I looked it up. Pro Football Focus has him currently ranked 94th out of 95 cornerbacks. He's allowed 5 of 10 catches this year and had 4 missed tackles last week against the Packers. So we just want to see Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle impact the game. I mean, I don't know why at times it seemed like, we got away from that. I know we came into the year, Tyreek Hill didn't want to chase 2,000 yards. I didn't know that meant he was going to, barely get 1,000 on the season, right? So you got to get those impact players out there. And while it's not the same secondary that we saw last week, there are some key players there.
What I thought was pretty interesting is last week against the Packers, the Titans missed 15 tackles, which added on an extra 118 yards just for the Packers moving the ball down the field. Is that Jonnu Smith's noise? I think that's the one thing that's all. I mean, there's been a bunch of things that's frustrated me about Miami's usage. Tanner Connor's involved, Julian Hill's involved. I just wish they'd use Jonnu Smith a little bit more. And when you consider the Tennessee's lack of tackling over the first few weeks, I think someone shifty like Smith could be a difference maker. Maybe limit the attempts that's needed to reach the end zone.
Yeah, I wish they would too. And you really thought that when they signed Jonnu Smith in the offseason that you'd see some plays where Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle, Devon Achane, and Jonnu Smith are out there at the same time. It's like, hey, good luck to you. Mm-hmm. To the defense. And we don't tend to see that. We see them kind of swapping in and out for each other. I'm not saying that like all 4 of those guys need to be out on the field at all times, but even though that wouldn't be a terrible idea with how things are going. But yeah, I hope Smith does get a little bit more involved and is a bigger part of the game plan because, what a killer last week with Durham Smythe. I don't know what he did in the offseason, but he's been terrible this year. And you take a look last week, I mean, there's 10 minutes left in the game. It's what, second down, third down. Skylar Thompson throws a great pass, corner of the end zone. It's not an easy catch, but it's one that Skylar Thompson needs to make. He makes that catch, even though the Seahawks have largely dominated the game. Dolphins are down a touchdown with 9.5 minutes left. And that's just kind of how the entire season's gone.
Yeah, and if we're getting on tight ends, Julian Hill hasn't been much better either. So I'm sitting here going Pepe Sylvia because I just realized that now this is a revenge game for Jonnu Smith, right? And Snoop Huntley, he is from Baltimore where all they do is target tight ends. So let's just go full Pepe Sylvia here. It's the Jonnu Smith revenge game. He's going to have a big game, finally.
Who leads the Dolphins in receiving yards? Is it too safe just to say Tyreek? I think they get Tyreek more involved, but here's for your guys' thoughts.
Tyreek ran his mouth this week about how this thing is going to flip. I sure hope it does. So yeah, let's go with Tyreek for that.
Not Barrios. Not Barrios.
And then Josh, you had some pretty good numbers on Devon Achane, didn't you? You want to share those real quick?
Yeah, so we were talking earlier about the Titans and all the missed tackles. Devon Achane is 4th in the NFL in missed tackles with 18. His 30% missed tackles rate is tied for 10th highest among all players with 20 touches. Per Next Gen Stats, Tennessee has missed 27 tackles this season at a rate of 14.2, translating to 208 yards on the ground. So Devon Achane, the Miami Dolphins offense, have a chance to feast. But, we talk about how we want to impact the run game, get that run game moving. I just picture Mike McDaniel coming out there and just throwing the ball like 100 times.
First play of the game, he's gunning it 30 yards downfield. There's no doubt about that. Let's flip the coin to the other side. The Miami Dolphins defense against a very, very volatile Titans offense. Where do we begin?
Yeah, I mean, a matchup I'm looking at is hopefully Jalen Phillips lined up against whoever the Titans' right tackle is, Nicholas Petit-Frere or Jalen Duncan. And I think Jalen is on prime time due for a breakout game. And gosh, we need it from him too. But overall, when you look at what you've seen this year with Zach Sealer, with Calais Campbell, even Emmanuel Agba, I mean, I feel like the edges of this defense have played a lot better than I thought they would. That's really to me, the only shining moment here of this season so far. So when you look at the Titans offensive line, it's not great. It's better than the Dolphins, but the right tackle position is one that they've got to exploit. On the left side, JC Latham, who's picked 7th overall, has done a really good job and is a massive guy. It would be fascinating to see him go up against Chop Robinson and with that size mismatch, and see if Chop may able to be able to use his speed to get the upper hand on him in a few situations. But otherwise, Latham's playing great for the Titans so far this year.
Yeah, that's a matchup I like to see. And you mentioned Agba. He was catching strays on Dolphins Twitter, I saw, but he impacted that. Was it the interception down there at the goal line that set the Dolphins up? And you mentioned Petit Frere. I was looking it up. He leads the NFL in pressures allowed with 19, and their left guard Peter Skorinski leads interior offensive linemen with 18 pressures. They're allowing pressures on 47% of dropbacks. So they have a chance to feast on Mayo Coffee. And I think, for as close as Jalen Phillips has been, for as close as Chop Robinson have been, I think this is that game where they really break out.
Will Levis has been sacked 15 times this season. That's the second most in the NFL behind Deshaun Watson. And then he also has 5 interceptions, the second most behind Anthony Richardson. This is a real do or die type offense because you consider the turnovers. You consider that every time you get sacked, odds are it's killing your drive. But Kat, the Titans also are currently 12th in explosive play rate at 9.3%. Those are plays that are either 10-plus yard runs or 20-plus yard passes. So, I mean, Calvin Ridley, DeAndre Hopkins, even Tony Pollard in the backfield, Tyler Boyd, they got some playmakers over there.
They do. And watching Will Levis, I mean, it's kind of like what you saw in the Dolphins debacle last year on primetime against them. I mean, where you never know what you're getting with Will Levis from down to down. I mean, he's had some of the worst moments and the best moments of a quarterback this year so far. And that's, for a young quarterback who's talented but very raw, that's not a big surprise. So, yeah, up until 4 minutes left last year, that we really thought that this is an absolute train wreck of a game from a rookie quarterback, and then he turns it all around. So they can't let him catch fire in this game, because if they do, this guy could put up 30 points, we could shut him out. It's going to be fascinating to see what happens.
And they're 0-3. I mean, this team wants to win, right? Brian Callahan, they need to get a win for him. And you mentioned Will Levis, being that boomer bust. I'm just sitting here just getting a little bit queasy, thinking that this is going to be that primetime matchup where we see this guy, break out, and they're talking about how he could, run the AFC South and things like that. So I kind of wish we would have bought one of his little Mayo things and gave it away for this week. That would have been pretty cool, but that's just hindsight.
Heinz Mayo site. Nice. Will Levis and the Titans beat the Dolphins last year despite being down 14 points with less than 3 minutes left. That was the first time it happened in 767 games. Something I'm a little queasy about is the fact that Kendall Fuller is still in concussion protocol. Storm Duck left last week's game with a shoulder injury. I believe he was listed as questionable. But Kat, how are you feeling about the Dolphins matching up on the boundaries against guys like Calvin Ridley, who I think has the second best separation among receivers? And then you have DeAndre Hopkins, who's just going to vacuum up targets for all 4 quarters.
Yeah, if they're healthy, I feel pretty good about it. And, good for Cater Kohu last week for getting that interception. I mean, okay, it was kind of dropped in his lap, but he was due for one. And Dolphins get the ball at the 6-yard line, and that needs to be a touchdown. So hopefully that gives a little confidence there. And I don't mean to turn this into a crying fest, but I swear last week, when the Dolphins were down early in the game, our second, third quarter, whenever it was, I tweeted out that Kendall Fuller is one player who's having an outstanding season, and bam, like clockwork, he gets a concussion. So I hope he's back, because having Fuller as the second guy makes the third cornerback position better and makes Cater Kohu better. So yeah, I'm hoping that this cornerback group gets some momentum going.
And if not, we got to rely on guys like Nick Needham and Ethan Bonner, right? Everyone talked about, Ethan Bonner looked throughout camp. So we might have to rely on that. But you mentioned Kendall Fuller. He's a guy who's had such a good season where, you didn't even really have to worry about him out there. I kind of forgot at times that he was over there because he was just clamping down and everyone else was, out of position or whatnot. So I would love to see Kendall Fuller back out there. But as of right now, when we're doing this, it doesn't look that good.
Last week, Jalen Ramsey was targeted 4 times in coverage. He allowed 3 receptions for a whopping 6 yards. Kendall Fuller was targeted twice. He allowed 1 reception for 22 yards. Jalen Phillips actually had an elite PFF coverage grade with a 90. Something that's making me super queasy, though, is I scroll down this list here. David Long Jr., targeted 7 times, allowed 7 receptions for 76 yards. Jordan Brooks targeted 4 times, allowed 4 receptions for 28 yards. Javon Holland targeted 5 times, allowed 4 receptions for 95 yards. And Jordan Poyer targeted twice, 2 receptions for 26 yards. This defense, if there's a weakness, it's going over the middle, man. Those numbers are ugly.
They are. And, I give Javon Holland a pass. It was probably the worst play of his career last week against DK Metcalf. You take out that 71-yard touchdown, he allows 3 catches for 24 yards, which is pretty much what he does every week. Still, it was one of the biggest plays in the game, but I don't think it's reflective of what we can expect moving forward here. David Long and Jordan Brooks, the Dolphins knew what they were signing up for. They're getting, and these guys stay on the field the entire time. I know the first week that they both played every snap. Forget how many they played last week, but and I don't mean that necessarily it's all bad. I mean they're stout against the run, or they usually are. I know the Dolphins haven't been great against the run, but they're tough. Anthony Weaver inside linebackers, but yeah, it leaves a lot to be desired over the middle and pass coverage.
Yeah, and you don't want those guys in coverage, but you're sitting there and we're talking about that, and I just imagine Duke Riley out there. So maybe we should be okay with David Long. Hopefully he can go, because we could be seeing Duke Riley chasing someone down, or God forbid, even Channing Tindall, like I've been asking for.
I think, too, if the Dolphins, let's say, were even 2-1, we'd be talking a lot higher about someone like Jordan Brooks, who I think's actually been pretty good in the middle of the field. I mentioned 4 targets, 4 receptions, 28 yards, 24 of that was yak. So it's another scenario. Hey, 1 missed tackle, all of a sudden that looks a little more warped. Someone who, Josh, I spoke about him a lot this offseason, Anthony Walker Jr., we might see a little bit more of him. I think that'd be interesting in the middle of the defense. Overall, generally speaking, do you guys have any concerns about the backfield of Pollard and Tajay Spears? They don't seem like the most explosive bunch. Famous last words on my part. But that seems like a little area where the Dolphins can try to contain it and make Will Levis throw the ball with one hand behind his back.
It concerned me more in the passing game than they do running the ball. So again, words that may come back to haunt me, but that also feeds into what you just said about the Dolphins over the middle. Are they a little vulnerable on checkdowns to these two backs? I think they are. So that could be a matchup problem for the Dolphins. But as far as running the ball up the gut for the Titans, no, I think the Dolphins are going to face a lot better running back tandems throughout the year.
Gone are the days or Derrick Henry, you should say. But yeah, again, in the passing game, those little dump offs, I could just see, I don't even want to speak in existence. A missed tackle going for a big gain, and we're just sitting here playing that clip with Tajay Spears having like a 40-point fantasy game.
The Dolphins are one of the oldest teams in the NFL, made the playoffs back-to-back years. This is supposed to be a roster that has some very strong strengths, some strengths that put them above a lot of teams in the NFL. Kat, from everything we spoke about today, what's the one scenario where the Dolphins can really strong-arm the Titans? If they want to win on Monday night, this is one area where they can kind of put the Titans in an awkward spot, force them to be uncomfortable, and start to pull away with the game, even if it's slowly having to deal with the backup quarterback situation.
Yeah, for them to have success here on Monday night, to me, they need to get a big defensive play and stay disciplined, stay ahead, and keep leaning on the Titans. I mean, we got that big defensive play last week. We got it twice with the interceptions. I mean, you're talking about Geno Smith. I'm pretty sure that this year and last year combined, he only had 7 interceptions. I could be wrong on that. He had 2. The Dolphins intercepted him twice last week. Once at the 6-yard line, the other one put him in midfield around there. That should not be 3 points. And I don't care who's your quarterback. So yeah, and need the defense to come up big here. And they need to rally around the fact that they're down to their third string quarterback and play like they have their third string quarterback out there and say, look, it's on us to make sure that if we throw the ball 15 times, we're still going to win.
It's kind of what I want to see. I want to see, like you mentioned, them be able to capitalize on it, but I want to really see them go out and just kind of play bully ball. You mentioned them only maybe throwing the ball 15 times. Wasn't there a game where Mac Jones, didn't they win where they threw like 3 times or something like that? I just want to see the Dolphins go out there and look like bullies, look like, that AFC team, maybe in a different way than we expected at the beginning of the year, right? We have Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle run the ball down their throats. I want to see some grit, and I want to see this team look like they have heart, because you go down 1-3 to the Tennessee Titans in Monday Night Football. We already see the tickets are barely selling. I mean, it's a long season then, and I know that expectations are low, but come on, man, this team should be able to beat the Titans if they are who we think they are.
2 teams that are basically in the bottom 5 of everyone's power ranking. It feels like the battle of mid. 2 teams that are very desperate for just finding an identity, finding some strength, showing that, hey, we can do X, Y, and Z very well. Kat, coming all the way back to Miami, you're playing at home on prime time. Is that enough to confidently say that this team will have less than 7 penalties on Monday after having 11 last week against Seattle? And it's worth saying Seattle had 11 penalties as well.
I think 7's about a good number based on what we've seen from this team. I mean, I hope it's not. I hope it's far less than that. But it goes back to, look, the Dolphins last week scored 3 points and had 11 penalties. And I'll tell you what, I think it should be. Rewatching the game, I thought it should have been more. Mm-hmm. So how do you undo that? Because it's one thing if you're being aggressive and you're putting 30 points on the board, but you also get 6 or 7 penalties. It kind of comes with the territory, but neither of those things are happening. They're not scoring and they're committing all these penalties. And a lot of them are pre-snap. That's not an aggressive penalty. That's just a mental mistake.
And now they're at home, right? You have no excuses. You're at home. You could use Seattle, the 12th man, so to speak, but now you're at home. I know the Dolphin fans are selling tickets, and sometimes the away team kind of fills that thing, but there should not be any of those pre-snap penalties that we've been kind of come accustomed to.
Looking ahead to next week, Kat, I just want to get your thoughts real quick before we wrap up here. Bradley Chubb, Anthony Weaver was talking about him. He's in all the defensive meetings, but it didn't sound too promising that he'd be ready to return after the 4-week IR stint, pup list stint, I should say. Based on our conversation today, does it feel like that maybe Miami can still continue to keep it slow with Bradley Chubb, seeing how the other guys have filled in well enough?
Yeah, the team's better with Bradley Chubb for sure. I hope they don't rush him back because, he's got a big contract. But yeah, I mean, Bradley Chubb was playing great football last year when he tore his, and it's a shame. I mean, 11 sacks, 6 forced fumbles. This guy was really on his way to a Pro Bowl season, and then he gets hurt with 3 minutes left in the Ravens game. I mean, it's just there are so many curseable moments over the last 6 or 7 games dating back to last year. I hope he comes back when he's ready.
There's a lot of curseable things for the last 20 plus years. Did we hear anything about Isaiah Wynn? That was I should know this, but isn't Isaiah Wynn sort of getting close to that time where we needed him, he could come back, and at this point that would absolutely be an upgrade over Robert Jones.
That's what I wanted to get your thoughts about, Kat, too. I don't think the offensive line has been terrible, but is Isaiah one where you see him walk out in the field next to Tron Armstead and you see a noticeable difference to that left side of the offense?
Yeah, I mean, Armstead it's a shame that he can't stay on the field because he's fantastic when he does. I mean, and he's athletic when he does too. It's not like we ever see him out there looking like he's hampered. I mean, if he's out there, he's a Pro Bowl left tackle, but unfortunately it's too common now where it's a surprise if he even lasts till the end of the game.
Mm-hmm. You guys mentioned curseable moments, and I think a lot of them did start with that Tennessee Titans game on Monday Night Football. So right before we wrap up here, final score predictions. Kat, we'll start with you. I
have no reason right now to think the Dolphins can beat anybody, unfortunately. I'd like to be optimistic, but I just can't be. I'm going to go 16-10 Titans in this one. And look, here's the other side of the coin here is that if the Dolphins win this game, I'm pretty sure that they're going to head into week 5 with a playoff spot. I know that's 12 weeks before the end of the season, but if they pull out an ugly win here, Now I'm looking forward to the 2 games after that against the Patriots and against the Colts and think, okay, you've shown you can win a football game here. You've got 2 beatable opponents coming up. Can you get to 3-3 or 4-2? It's not looking promising right now. But on the other side, if they drop to 1-3, I'm going to be looking at those next 2 games thinking, if they can't beat the Titans, if they can't beat the Titans at home on prime time, then are they going to win against the Colts or the Patriots? I don't think so. And then you're looking at 1-5, and then we're looking forward to the draft already.
Well, that's what I was gonna say. At one point, do we become the same old Dolphin fans where we're like, okay, now I don't even know if it's worth it to win anymore? I mean, it feels like we should not be at this point 4 weeks into the year, but that could absolutely be the case after this one. I'm going to continue to be a sicko, Jake, and I'm just going to keep picking the Dolphins. I don't think it matters at this point. 22-19, I think they find a way to do. I mean, I really don't think they find a way to do it, but I have nothing else to do than to hope. So find a way, Mike McDaniel, find a way. So we're not sitting here looking towards a draft, and we have good things to look at. Like Kat said, we would be in a playoff position, and when we came into this year, all that mattered was how the Dolphins finished the season. So if we had to hit this, these few speed bumps at the beginning to get this thing going, I guess I'm okay with that. I'm talking myself into hope.
The only thing that changes a speed bump from a ramp is attitude, Josh, and driving faster. This Miami Dolphins offense hopefully still has all its speed. And it feels like it's a disaster scenario, but there are 3 teams, I believe, right now that are all 0-3 in the NFL. All of them are in the AFC. This is such a defining moment for the season where Miami can completely crumble, or, we could be talking about 3-3, 4-2 being worse so back. I'm going to flip it on Cat. I'm going to say 16-10 Dolphins. I do think it's going to be like a field goal game. I kind of feel like it's going to be like the Dallas game from last year where a lot of field goals, a field position battle, and just 2 awkward teams. But Cat, Houtz, thank you so much for joining me. Everyone out there listening, thank you so much for tuning in to Another Dolphins Podcast. Go have a wonderful weekend. Praying to God the Dolphins win on Monday night. And most importantly, fins up.
Fins up.
Fins up.